Good afternoon. I am back. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's Housing Policy Forum 2025. I am so glad to see you all. My name is Dora Leon Gallo, and I am the chair of the NLHC's Board of Directors. I'm so pleased to welcome you all to this year's forum at such a critical time in our nation's history. The NLHC team has put together an incredibly engaging event this year with a dynamic roster of speakers and a wide range of plenary and breakout sessions at this really important time. Housing Policy Forum 2025 is particularly important this year as we've all experienced the harmful actions of the Trump administration from day one. NLHC's Policy Forum convenes advocates, researchers, housing practitioners, tenant leaders, congressional leaders, and many more for an exchange of resources, thought partnership, and collective next steps in our mobilization to address America's housing and homelessness crisis. And before I go any further, I'd like us to begin today's program by acknowledging that this hotel sits on the unceded homelands of the Nacotchtank and Acostan and Piscataway peoples, and by recognizing that the genocide of Native people is part of a long legacy of displacement and injustice that continues to impact housing instability today. At the Coalition, we have gone beyond just a land acknowledgement, and as a form of reparations, we will be making yet again another donation to the Native American Rights Fund, a Native-founded and Native-led organization that fights to protect Native American rights, resources, and lifeways through litigation, legal advocacy, and legal expertise. Thank you. Now, more than ever, NLHC's position is to continue to lead the charge forward on the path to housing justice. Last year, we celebrated 50 years of advocacy for the lowest income and most marginalized communities. Since being founded in 1974 by Cushing Dobir, our organization has been driven by a single mission: to achieve racially and socially equitable public policy that ensures people with the lowest income have quality homes that are accessible and affordable in communities of their choice. We continue to face serious challenges each day with this administration, with actions that will result in dire consequences that impact not only the present, but future generations. The most vulnerable communities will be unprotected against malicious attacks. Homeless shelters will close their doors. Communities will stop construction on new projects to increase our affordable housing stock. Households receiving rental assistance will face imminent rent increases and evictions. And communities, families, and small businesses that have been impacted by disaster will be unable to rebuild. But it is our unwavering resolve to keep fighting until we achieve housing justice for the lowest income people that will make the difference. Together, we will make that difference. Because our collective work does push back against the harmful attacks on housing, on homeless programs and funding. We have had some successes already, and with your unwavering commitment of advocates like you in this room, we can prevail. And we are so grateful for all you have done and all that you will continue to do to ensure housing justice for people with the lowest incomes and for people experiencing homelessness. In guiding our efforts to achieve our goals are the incredibly dedicated members of the NLHC's Board of Directors, 25 people strong. So it is bittersweet that after 10 years on the board, I will be ending my term. And I am thrilled, you got clapping, I'm leaving. I am thrilled to acknowledge that at yesterday's board meeting that we elected Dr. Bambi Hayes Brown, President and CEO. Yes. Dr. Hayes Brown is President and CEO of Georgia Advancing Communities Together, also known as Georgia ACT. She will become our new board chair. So thank you, Bambi. Now, Bambi and I have served together for several years now, and I think she's going to make a great chair. I'd like to also acknowledge the rest of NIC's board members. You can see the representation here. In addition to Dr. Bambi, we have Zella Knight, our first vice chair. And Maverity, second vice chair. Moises Loza, our treasurer. I don't know where he is. Aaron Gorenstein is our secretary. Andrew Bradley joins the board as an at-large executive committee member. Yes. And you see the other members of the board from throughout the country. Kathy Elderman, Derek Belgard, Russell Bennett, Stacy Berger, Diana Blackwell, Lorraine Brown, Ali. Oh, did we make a mistake here? Ali Cannington, Geraldine Collins, Catherine Monet, Chriselle Pillay, Hassan Rashid, Megan Sandel, Marie-Claire Tran-Leung, Sharon Vogel, and Mindy Woods. Thank you all. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to have been involved with this talented, dedicated, inspiring group in my role as board chair. There are 3 other board members who are ending their service on the board, and I'd like to extend our deepest thanks to Nan Roman, Lisa D'Souza, and Shalonda Rivers. We've been very grateful for their service. Oh, I'm leaving too. The coalition is always accepting nominations for new members for our board. You will see here our nominating process. We always strive to have 6 low-income members, 6 representatives of national organizations, 6 representatives from the coalition state partners, and up to 7 unrestricted or at-large members. In addition to the members of the coalition's board, I wanted to recognize NLHC's major sponsors. Without their generous support, our efforts to achieve housing justice would not be possible, so I thank all of our sponsors. And likewise, we have special members also who have a stake in our work and a seat at our policy table. We're grateful for their contributions to our advocacy efforts. Now, as many of you know, the board has launched a national search for our next president and CEO with the assistance of Boardwalk Consulting. And in the meantime, we have appointed Renee Willis to serve as our interim president and CEO in January of this year. You will hear from Renee shortly, but she's been on the NIC team for almost 10 years and serving most recently as our senior vice president, leading our racial equity, diversity, and inclusion division. We're so grateful to have Renee's steadfast leadership and commitment during these very challenging times. You've made a tremendous impact in reaffirming the coalition's position as a thought and action leader amidst this difficult environment, so we thank you. One final note, as we launch our forum today, I want to share that we've made a couple of improvements to this year's forum, thanks to the coalition's terrific external affairs team. One big improvement is that we've introduced a new app, the Event app by EventsAir, to gather questions from the audience members during the plenary sessions. Now, even with the new app, we're still only going to have limited time for questions and answers, so it's really important for you to submit those questions when you can. And at the same time, we recognize that not everyone can use the app. So audience members can also ask questions by visiting a table at the back of the room where you can write your questions on an index card and submit them to a coalition staff member, and we'll enter that into the map too. And if you have any questions on how to use it, we do have a digital hub resource table where a member of the events team can help you provide support. So if you do have the app, you should check it, because you will see that we've made a slight change to the program today during the plenary session. We're really fortunate to have Senator Elizabeth Warren join us this afternoon, but as we all know, the schedule and the life of a senator is incredibly unpredictable and busy. So she is planning to join us, but there's been a slight change. She's going to come at 3 o'clock instead. So we're extending the opening session to 3:30. It should not affect any of the breakout sessions that begin at 3:45. But this also means that we get to move up the remarks of our interim president and CEO, Renee Willis. So I'm really pleased to be able to be the person who introduces her and to welcome her to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Renee Willis.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate all of you so very much. And it is so good to be in community with you once again. Thank goodness for that, right? It has been a long and tough year. But again, so glad to be in community with you. I just want to get a sense of who's in the room. I did this earlier, actually yesterday, with the state and tribal partner meeting and tenant session meeting. But if this is your first time here for the forum, for Policy Forum, can you please raise your hand? Oh, look at that. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making the time to be here. We so appreciate each and every one of you. And I also do want to see, because I know I've seen some folks who have been here quite a number of years as well. So if you've been here, let's say between under 5 years, 5 years and under, if you can raise your hands, that would be great. Thank you, and welcome back. Hopefully we did something right to bring you back, so welcome back. And then I also, and if you've been here for at least 10 years or more, if you could please raise your hands. Oh, this is fantastic. Well, hello. Thank you so much for your unwavering support. We really appreciate you for being here as well. So let's get started. And I know, I don't have to tell any of you any of this, but we are in a moment of immense challenge. But we're also in a moment of immense power, right? We do have power. And across the country, families are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Affordable housing is under attack. The very programs that ensure millions of people have a safe and stable place to call home are being threatened every single day. And yet, despite it all, we are here. We are here. We are organizing. We are taking action. We are winning battles that many thought were unwinnable. We are doing that thing. And since the start of the year, we have faced an onslaught of policy decisions designed to roll back decades of progress. But we have also shown that what happens when we stand together, we win. And that's what we're showing, because this movement is not just about policy, it's about people. It's about families, it's about seniors, it's about people with disabilities, it's about our returning citizens, it's about entire communities who rely on housing programs that we fight to protect. And as we look to the road ahead, one thing is clear, very clear. We are ready for this challenge. We knew from day one that 2025 would bring new unprecedented attacks. We have seen it just each and every day. And these are attacks on housing programs. On January the 20th, MLK Day, the White House issued a series of executive orders, including one that sought to end federal diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility initiatives. 1 week later, on January the 27th, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, issued a directive to freeze all federal grants and contracts, wide sweeping. And then on February the 14th, Valentine's Day, a directive was issued to terminate half of all HUD staff. Half. Think about that and what that means for the programs. It would gut HUD's ability to provide and oversee critical federal housing, community development, homelessness resources. It would jeopardize rental assistance for low-income households, stall affordable housing construction, and cripple fair housing enforcement. It would take away resources that help millions of seniors, people with disabilities, and families struggling to make ends meet. That's what it would do. And just last week, we learned that HUD decided to remove basic requirements from disaster recovery funds, which will cause even more disaster survivors, particularly those with the lowest incomes and those who are most marginalized, to struggle to recover after disasters. So what's happening at HUD right now is not just about bureaucratic decisions or budget cuts. It's about dismantling the very foundation of housing security in this country. That's what it's really about. And they're happening at a time when there is already a housing and homelessness crisis, when there is a shortage of 7.1 million rental homes available and affordable to extremely low-income households. And it's happening when, on any given night, more than 770,000 people experience homeless in this country. The termination of HUD staff, the gutting of programs, the termination of technical assistance and fair housing contracts, and the stripping away of resources aren't isolated actions. They are deliberate actions to weaken the agency responsible for ensuring that people, particularly low-income people, low-income individuals, Black and brown communities, and those who have been historically marginalized, have access to safe, stable, and affordable housing. And let's be clear, this isn't new. We have a long history in this country of underserving communities of color, of enacting policies that segregate, exclude, and displace. The legacy of redlining, urban renewal, and disinvestment has shaped the reality we see today, where Black and brown people are disproportionately homeless and housing insecure. That's not an accident. These decisions have upheld a housing system that deepens inequality and denies too many people the stability and security they deserve. And now the administration is rolling back protections, gutting civil rights enforcement, undoing decades of progress. The very gains won through the civil rights movement, through years of organizing and struggle, are under attack. But here's the thing, they want us to believe we're powerless, but we are not powerless. We have fought before, we will fight again, because housing justice is racial justice, and it is deeply intersectional. And we will not stand by while they attempt to erase our rights, our protections, and our future. Housing justice is economic justice, it's gender justice, it's disability justice, and we will continue to fight for a future where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. So when the OMB directive to freeze the federal grants and contracts were issued, we moved quickly. More than 8,000 actions taken in less than 48 hours. That's right, in less than 48 hours, through the advocacy platform that we use. And our collective outcry worked. Just minutes before the memo was set to take effect, OMB rescinded it. And we didn't stop there. Since February the 6th, in response to the directive to terminate half of HUD staff, more than 25,000 actions have taken place through our advocacy platform. We will keep the pressure on, and we will continue. We all will continue to keep the pressure on. We launched also weekly strategy meetings with national and multi-sector, national housing programs and multi-sector organizations. We organized a hands-off rally in front of HUD headquarters, led by Congresswoman Maxine Waters. That's right. and 12 other members of Congress, and nearly 300 people showed up with no advance warning or notice. Just in a matter of days, 3 to 4 days, 4 days, people showed up. And it was powerful. And they showed up to tell Elon Musk and Doge to keep your hands off housing. And together, we are laying the groundwork for what's to come next. So Robin D.G. Kelley is a historian, an author, a scholar, and he's best known for his work on race and social movements and radical politics. And one of his most influential books is called Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination. And it explores the history of radical organizing, emphasizing how social movements are fueled by the ability to imagine a better future. In it, Kelley argues that dreams of liberation and justice are essential to building transformative movements. He writes, "In the poetics of struggle and lived experience, in the utterances of ordinary folk, in the cultural products of social movements, in the reflections of activists, we discover the many different cognitive maps of the future, of the world not yet born." Robin Kelley's words remind us that in the midst of struggle, in the midst of hardship, we still carry the blueprints of a world that has yet to be built, a world of justice, dignity, and equity. But I don't have to tell you that today. Imagining that future can feel harder than ever. Yet, despite the challenges we face, it is precisely in moments like these that we must remember where true change begins. And transformation, my friends, does not start in the halls of power. It does not start in Washington, D.C., or in a policy memo. It starts with story, with memory, and the lessons we pass down. And I know this because my grandfather, a sharecropper in Southern Virginia, taught me this lesson long before I had ever the words for it. As a child, I was full of questions, and I wanted to understand what he grew and how he grew it, and how he worked the land, and what it meant to raise cotton. And one day, instead of just telling me, he showed me. He planted a cotton stalk in a flower pot. And when I came back to visit in the summer, it was in full bloom. He set me down under the shade of an old willow tree, and he walked me through it, showing me the parts of the plant and explaining to me what not to touch so that I wouldn't cut my fingers. He was passing down the knowledge of his labor. And he handed me the cotton stalk, and I still have that to this day. Because that was not just a plant, it was a lesson. It was a reminder of the struggle he endured, of the hands that came before mine, of the sacrifices that built the path I walk today. He planted something not just for himself, but for me, so that I would never forget. And that is what we are doing here. We are planting something, not just for today, but for generations to come. We are carrying the stories, the struggles, and the dreams of those who came before us, and we are daring to imagine something new. Even in the face of adversity, even when they try to take away all our resources, our rights, and our dignity. Even when it feels like all we can do is hold the line. Because we are not just fighting for housing justice, we are building it. We are imagining the world that has yet to be born, and we are bringing it into being one action, one policy, one protest, one law at a time. And just as my grandfather's cotton stalk, what we plant today will grow. We are not just playing defense. We are fighting for a future where no one has to wonder if they will have a home tomorrow. And we are working to build, thinking about on the federal level, we're working to build bipartisan support for solutions that will put us on a path towards ending homelessness and housing poverty. This year, our priorities include reintroducing and building support for the Eviction Crisis Act and the Family Stability and Opportunity Vouchers Act, which are also supported by the Opportunity Starts at Home campaign. And we're working to strengthen tenant protections and housing rights, not just at the federal level, but in states and communities all across the country. And in the past year, we've seen real progress in the fight for housing and homelessness solutions at the state and local levels. Across the country, advocates have won new investments and policies that will make a real difference in people's lives. For example, in Maine launched an $18 million rent relief program and increased funding for affordable housing by $20 million. Yes. In Massachusetts passed the Affordable Homes Act, committing over $5 billion to housing programs over the next 5 years. Yes. Pennsylvania raised the funding cap on its Affordable Housing Trust Fund by $40 million, unlocking millions more each year. Louisiana created a dedicated local housing trust fund, securing 2% of New Orleans' annual budget to fight homelessness. That's right. In California, a client bill of rights was passed to protect people experiencing homelessness. And that was across 79 of their counties. Delaware expanded fair housing laws to prevent discrimination against voucher holders. In Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, they passed multiple statewide protections, including measures supporting survivors of domestic violence and undocumented renters. And I've only just highlighted a few of the wins. Let's give them a round of applause. And this movement, again, is not just about policies, it is about people. It's about the more than 10 million people with extremely low incomes across this country who pay more than half their income on rent. And so one of the things we did in terms of knowing that this movement is about people, we launched The Collective. The Collective, it's a tenant and community, they're tenant and community leaders with lived experience of housing insecurity who work towards housing justice and racial equity in their neighborhoods and also on the federal level. If you are a member of The Collective, please stand. Please stand, Collective, yes. And we also this year launched Generation Housing Justice, a national initiative bringing together 20 young adults ages 19 to 24 to build power and to advocate for long-term solutions. If you are a member of Generation Housing Justice, please stand. And thank you for being with us. And I will also add, too, when we did a solicitation for applications, we had over 200 young people to apply for only 20 slots. So the desire is absolutely there. And it is why we are supporting a cohort advancing tenant protections in the Southeast, focusing on states like Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Georgia, where tenant rights have historically been neglected. And starting in May, it is why we are launching the Our Homes, Our Votes Tenant Fellowship, bringing together 20 leaders committed to increasing voter turnout among low-income renters. We've also invested in people by launching the Training Institute for Tenants and Residents, a space dedicated to educating, equipping, and empowering renters to advocate for their rights, drive policy change, and lead community-driven solutions to housing challenges. Yes. And we also, because again, thinking about stories, one of the most powerful tools we have in the fight for housing justice is our own story. And that's why we launched a new story bank called Voices Heard, a new way for tenant and resident leaders to share their own words, how housing insecurity, homelessness, and cuts to critical HUD programs are impacting their lives and communities. Just using a smartphone, people can record short videos, putting a face and a voice to the crisis that too many are experiencing. These videos will be shared on a platform that will highlight stories from across the country in rural, urban, tribal, and suburban communities, making it clear that this is a national issue. And as I close, I want to remind you all to catch your breath. To catch your breath. I want to remind you what it means to breathe in this movement and in this time, and how we can sustain ourselves, find strength in one another, and continue pressing towards and forward despite the challenges. We must keep building and we must breathe. We must find balance, knowing that rest is a revolutionary act. We must embrace resilience, standing back up no matter how many times they try to knock us down. We must fight for equity, because justice that is not intersectional is not justice at all. We must take action, because dreams without action remain just dreams. We must hold on to tenacity, knowing that real change does not come easily. We must focus on healing, because our communities and our spirits depend on it. And we must empower others, ensuring that those most impacted by injustice lead the fight for justice. And so I ask you today, what are you planting? What visions are you carrying forward? What world do you refuse to stop fighting for? Because years from now, when the next generation asks us what we did, what we built, how we endured, how we dreamed, I want to be able to say with full certainty, we never stopped imagining, we never stopped building, and we never stopped fighting. And because of that, the world is better than the one that we inherited. So let's keep going. Let's keep dreaming. Let's keep building the future that we all deserve. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so very much. And I love you back. And so now we get to have a conversation with Nicole Hannah-Jones. Who's excited for that? Absolutely. So I'm thrilled, number one, to be in community with you all and with Nicole Hannah-Jones. And she's someone who has never shied away from the hard truth and who reminds us that telling the truth is a form of action. Nicole Hannah-Jones has helped evolve how this country understands history, and just as importantly, how that history shapes our present-day policies, our neighborhoods, our schools, our zoning boards, and yes, even in the laws that decide who gets to stay and who gets pushed out. She's a force, as we all know. Again, she's a truth teller, and one of the fiercest minds of our time. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, the creator of the 1619 Project, a New York Times Magazine staff writer, the Knight Chair of Race and Journalism at Howard University, and the founder of both the Center for Journalism and Democracy and the 1619 Freedom School in her hometown of Waterloo, Iowa. But you may also remember, and this is why it means so much for us to have her here today, is that back in 2013, Nicole Hannah-Jones and Jeff Larson were honored right here at NLIC with the Media Award for their article called Living Apart. It was a Living Apart series. And that reporting exposed the ways federal policies have not just ignored, but actively sustained housing segregation and discrimination in America. She's been naming these truths for a very long time. So this conversation is not just about analysis, it's about action. It's about what we build from this moment, even as, and especially when those in power are trying to tear us down. So please join me in welcoming the one and only Nicole Hannah-Jones.
You have a preference?
You want to sit here? It is so wonderful meeting you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here.
You look great.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I'm so glad you said that because I wanted to say the same. You truly do. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to jump right in the deep end, if that's okay with you.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So we're going to talk about the myth of de facto segregation. And so you have been very clear for a very long time that racial segregation in this country didn't just happen, that it was created and maintained by laws and policies. And I would love if you could speak to the danger of how we continue to frame segregation as accidental or inevitable, and what's lost when we sanitize the truth.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back. I forgot how long ago that was. It feels like we have lived in like 5 different Americas
Isn't that
since
the truth?
2013.
Absolutely.
We would love to be back in that America, and that America was not great.
That's right.
But so thanks for having me back, and thank you for sharing that really powerful personal story. Of course, I talk often about how my own father was born into a sharecropping farm on a cotton plantation in Mississippi. And I think why those stories matter is one, yes, it is important for us to remember, but it's also important for us to remember that this history is not even past.
Right.
Right, that there are millions of Americans today who were born into racial apartheid in the United States, and they want us to forget and make this into a black and white past when this is a living history. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. It was just a powerful opening story.
Thank you.
So I think we need to understand, why do we even use a phrase like de facto? And de facto segregation was really a phrase that was created to talk about segregation in the North. So we knew that de jure segregation by law, existed in the South. And we like to pretend that official segregation did not exist in the North. So we gave it a separate label in schools and in housing, and we called it segregation by fact, as if it just kind of naturally or inevitably occurred, as if there were not, one, there was legal by law segregation in the North, but also even where it wasn't dictated by law, it was created by official policies. It was created by federal policy through redlining maps. It was created through zoning ordinances, as we know. We know that in many cities, City officials, once black people started moving up north in large numbers during the Great Migration, would sit together and decide what neighborhoods would they allow black people to settle into. And they would make deals with real estate agents not to rent or sell to black people outside of those neighborhoods. That's how you ended up having so much heavy concentration of black families in certain neighborhoods, where you had kind of single family homes that get turned into tenements because black people could not move outside of those boundaries. So by creating a term like de facto, and we create this false sense of the opposition to integration in the North, the opposition to integration by white people who were not Southern white people, and of course the opposition to integration that we still see today. So I think it's really important to know that even today, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, I know I'm not telling you all anything that you don't know, but today, segregation, whether it be economic or racial, and obviously they often go hand in hand, that is still created by official policy. That there is still, the primary use of segregation, tool of segregation now is zoning. Zoning for single family or large lots, or only allowing affordable housing if it is for seniors and not for families. So there are lots of ways that we are still doing this through official policy. We just, of course, since 1964 and 1968, can't say that we're doing it. But prior to that, you could legally discriminate against black people, against women, against families in housing. So that history of not, like I don't use, you know this, I don't use the term de facto. When segregation is happening through official policy, I consider that illegal segregation, and that is segregation by law. And so we can't allow, we are in a time where we have government that just makes terms and defines terms how they want, and oftentimes we kind of go along with it, and we start to use their definitions, and the way that we have to push back is using the actual definitions and not allowing opposition to frame things in ways that are not truthful.
That's right. Yeah, that's a powerful statement, because you're right, in terms of the definitions, that's what we're called on to do as advocates, to push back, and to name ourselves. So I appreciate that as well. So let's talk about the series that won you the NLIC Media Award. So you uncovered how federal government, how the federal government, rather than enforcing fair housing laws, often enabled ongoing segregation. And here we are a decade later, and this administration is literally dismantling HUD, closing down field offices, laying off half of the HUD staff, and also trying to sell the buildings. So really trying to dismantle HUD. Where do you think we made progress in housing over the years, if at all? And why do you think HUD is now under attack?
So I'm the perpetual glass half empty person. So I don't think we, and I guess the reason I know why I am, but I just think that we get so used to injustice that we want to count the tiniest victories. Yeah. When we should have equality in housing. We should. And we don't think we can speak that because we have to be grateful for every little inch of ground we've gotten. But meanwhile, people can live their entire lives and never have stable housing, never have adequate housing, never have housing in a high opportunity area. And so I don't think we've ever made much progress here. And what's important when we think about HUD, HUD has always been reviled from the moment HUD was founded. We have to understand, my reporting on Living Apart was to show that not only had the federal government helped create housing segregation, but it had no interest ever. It has never had any interest in actually enforcing the Fair Housing Act and undoing segregated housing. That if you look at that history, then the Fair Housing Act was the very last of the civil rights legislation passed.
That's right.
That Lyndon B. Johnson, now, we think the most violent fights, and they were, the most violent fights were over voting, because of course political rights determine all other rights that you're going to have. But Lyndon B. Johnson thought he had a better chance of passing the 65 Voting Rights Act than a Fair Housing Act. Think about that. Think about the pictures of Selma. Think about the church bombings. Think of all the violence that was deployed against black folks who were just trying to fight for their political rights. And he delayed working on the Fair Housing Act for one reason, because all the northern white people who supported civil rights laws that they thought were going to punish the South refused to support an open housing law, which was considered the civil rights law for the North. Right? Because housing is how you accomplish segregation in the North. You don't have to have laws about where kids can go to school, where people can eat, what parks they're going to use, what jobs they're going to work to. If you segregate housing, you go to school in your neighborhood, you shop in your neighborhood, you tend to work closer to you, especially if you're low income, right? So they were able to create segregation through housing in the North. And so all of those allies in Congress, those white allies who supported the 64 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Civil Rights Act would not support an open housing act. Yeah. That tells you what we're fighting here. And so if you know the history, you know Dr. King got assassinated. There were more than 100 rebellions across the United States, all across the North. So we have all these new legal civil rights, and yet northern communities are exploding because those new rights were not impacting the circumstance of black Americans outside of the South at all. And that's what gets a passage of a Fair Housing Act. King gets assassinated. Walter Mondale, who ushered through the act, says Congress thought, there's literally National Guardsmen ringed around the Capitol building, guarding it from the rebellions, and they thought they had to pass this act or there was going to be a civil war. This is what Walter Mondale told me himself. We thought there was going to be a revolution if we did not pass this Fair Housing Act. That is the obstacle that was faced. So they create HUD, and then they create the Fair Housing Division of HUD, and it has always been the smallest division of HUD. It's been the blackest division of HUD, and it's received the least funding. Because I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but if you understand that HUD actually worked in opposition to fair housing, because the most segregated housing in America is public housing. So you had an agency that at once was operating the most segregated housing in America and also tasked with enforcing the Fair Housing Act. And community development grants, right? So it's also giving millions of dollars to cities to develop, and it doesn't want to force those cities to actually comply with the Fair Housing Act, which does have an affirmative, right, provision that not only did it outlaw housing discrimination, but it also said the government had an affirmative obligation to undo the harm it had done, to create integrated communities the same way it had created segregated communities. Yeah. So when we see HUD has been a perpetual target of conservative administrations, and it's been neglected mostly by progressive, so-called progressive administrations. When I did my investigation in 2013, think about who was in the White House in 2013. It was Obama, in case y'all forgot. And when I did the investigation, I found that only one time in the entire history of HUD had HUD ever taken a city's money for failing to comply with the Fair Housing Act, once. Wow. Meanwhile, those cities are being sued, those cities are settling, counties are sometimes HUD is being sued itself for violating the law that it's supposed to enforce. So we shouldn't be shocked that it's a target now, because folks don't want black people living next to them. They don't want low-income people living next to them. And they certainly don't believe that, as we're seeing everything being privatized, the fact that the federal government still helps operate housing for people who have low income And in a place like New York, where we have a lot of high-rise, we have the only remaining high-rise public housing really in the country, most of it is in very prime real estate.
Oh, absolutely.
On the water.
That's right.
Right? So
That's right.
this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the further dismantling of the social compact, the belief that government owes anything to those of us who are not super wealthy. And HUD is just the perpetual target of that. HUD is seen as the black people's department of the federal government.
Right.
It's not. It serves all people,
right.
and the primary people who get enforcement under the Fair Housing Act are actually people with disabilities, not black people, which is actually true for a lot of civil rights law, which is why I hope people will understand that the attack on civil rights is not just an attack on black people's rights.
Yeah.
It's an attack on all of our rights. That's a different lecture, though.
We have time, though.
Right. We need to get it together. This is a total aside, but it was just kind of an amazing moment for me when the Trump administration came out and eliminated DEI. And there was that A on the end, and people were shocked by that A. And suddenly, a whole bunch of folks who didn't know that they were getting DEI realized. Veterans.
That's right.
Veterans didn't realize that they were also DEI, like that this belief that the only people who are going to be heard are people who look like me and look like you.
That's right.
I hope we have all been disabused of that. That any marginalized person, any person who needed just an extra hand to have an equal opportunity, not an additional opportunity, an equal opportunity,
That's
are having those abilities stripped away. And so now I saw this white man on, I'm just really going off the map here. You know, because we need community right now, y'all. Like, we truly, every day, it's hard to wake up in this country every day, and we need community, and we need to be in a room with folks who I believe have a remaining morality, which seems to be really receding. But I was watching this town hall with this white man. He was probably about 55, 60 years old. And he's saying, "You're not going to take my rights." And I said, I mean, I feel you. I appreciate you. But it made me think, you know, when have white men had to go and protest for their rights? I just hadn't heard that language of rights coming from a white man before. And I'm actually not being funny. I actually thought that was a profound moment, because so many of us are used to always having to articulate that we have innate rights that need to be defended. And it shows you how frightened people are and how far we are verging off of this cliff towards authoritarianism, that a white man feels that I have to defend my rights.
Right.
Not my privileges, not the things that not my yard or not my house, or he was talking about his innate rights. And I think that speaks to where we are in this country. Now, if we can somehow find a way to build coalition around that, that people who didn't maybe understand that their rights were connected to the rights of the rest of us, are seeing that now. And so what do? This could actually be, I'm about to say something inspirational. That's not like me. That is not like me. I don't know what's happening, but...
Look, we won't tell anyone.
Right.
We'll just keep it within this room.
Keep it to yourself.
That's what we'll do.
Right. It could be like this moment of possibility to build coalition with people who didn't understand that they needed to build coalition with us. And there could be some power in that moment.
That's right. Absolutely. So I have to ask you, when you started shaking up the world with the 1619 Project, did you, which if you haven't read it, and I'm sure most of you in this room have, you have to read it, it's excellent. But did you know that you'll be getting entire school boards and governors and late night talk show hosts worked up about about the 1619 Project? Or was that just a bonus?
First of all, I'm about to hire this sister to come on the road with me.
Oh, Oh, she's good.
I'm like, I need a hype woman like you at every
She's that.
event that I
That's
do.
right. That's right.
What's your name? Zella.
From California.
Miss Zella. Love you. Doctor. Right. I heard somebody say professor. They say you will put some respect on her credentials. I got you. So, did I know? No. I mean, look, I knew I was going to, that the project was going to provoke the kind of typical conservative outrage. Of course. I mean, we came out the gate saying, you know, crossing out 1776 and saying 1619 is our real founding. Like, you know, we wanted to be provocative because we're trying to unsettle this established narrative, this mythology of America that has gotten us exactly where we are today. This belief in the infallibility of this nation founded on this great idea and the oldest continuing democracy in the world. It wasn't, right? And so we knew that we were making arguments that were going to make some people deeply uncomfortable. And if they hadn't, the project would have been a failure because it wasn't supposed to tell you what you already knew about this country and just reinforce the mythology that people already had. So I knew there was going to be, again, like kind of typical pushback, but no, I am sorry, y'all, for what I've done.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize.
I couldn't.
Yeah, because it certainly shifted public conversation about the legacy of slavery and the systems built to uphold white supremacy. So we need to have conversation and dialogue about those things. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
It's gotten crazy, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
it has. If we're being real, it really has.
I mean, we're seeing more books banned than in the history of them counting and cataloging book bans. We're seeing African American studies actually being banned in certain states from being taught, curriculums being purged. And now, of course, we see just the removal of even acknowledgement of Black first and Black contributions, and also women and also queer people. So again, it's all connected. We have to understand that. And it's taught me a lot, though, because we were just talking about, you know, this piece I did in 2013, a major investigation into federal failures to enforce the Fair Housing Act and why Black people remain, because of that, the most segregated people in America, regardless of income. You didn't see this massive pushback against any reporting I've done. I've done reporting on school segregation, housing segregation, police violence. What drove the pushback was when I actually tried to unsettle our collective memory and understanding of who we are inherently as a country. So they were fine with me exposing the inequality. There was no fight against that. I wish there had been a fight because I wanted us to actually grapple with the segregation in housing and the segregation in schools. I wasn't just writing it because I enjoyed writing about it. I think it's critical. It is important. But it was only when I had a project that called into question the very idea of who we think we are and how we want to remember ourselves as a nation, that all of white power, I mean, we're talking about the President of the United States. We're talking about sitting senators introduced the bill SOS, Saving American History Act, against the project, which is, never in the history of the country has a single piece of legislation come against a single act of journalism or literature.
That's right.
That's right. And so that tells us, as you were saying in your opening remarks, the power of narrative. You all in the work you do know the power of narrative. You know how important housing is for the people you serve, for yourselves, for your own communities. And you know that that housing is kept out based on narrative, not facts. And so the people who control the narrative control the policies. So when you hear about a fight against affordable housing, I always pay attention to how it's framed. Whose rights are being protected? Whose opportunities, whose lives are we investing in? Right? This is my community. I bought in this community so I could have this. But we're not framing it in terms of who are these other members of the community who deserve access to these same things as well. So it is narrative, and it was the ability at the New York Times to start to reshape this narrative, this collective lie we have told ourselves about this country that brought power, because then it exposes power. It exposes the lie of power. And it tells us that the reality we see was created. That all the inequality we experience is not natural, it's not innate. There's not, look, black folks don't love crime. We don't love living in neighborhoods with raggedy housing. We don't, it's like anything that anybody else want, we want. Right. But the narrative justifies how we are forced to live by saying it's not policy, it's not structure, it's not law that has created this. It's just black folks don't want better. Mm-hmm. And so if you control the narrative, you control the policy. Mm-hmm. And they understand that as well. And so if you think about, I know this is, all my answers get long, y'all, but the project came out in 2019. Mm-hmm. There was a little bit of conservative backlash, and then it died out. And then we saw George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And then people began to come back to the project and to study the project and to say, oh, this was not one individual police officer. A society created that moment. Mm-hmm. A society creates a moment where I know I'm being filmed, and I will kneel on that man's neck until he dies, knowing I'm being filmed, because I know this society will not make me pay a consequence if I kill a black man. Society builds that moment. Right. And so people are looking to understand this, and they're using the language of 400 years, of 1619, of saying this is a structural issue. And the polling shows that white Americans were also starting to make those connections in a way they previously hadn't. Mm-hmm. That the number that always sticks out to me is at the height of those protests, about 44% of white Republicans said that racism was a primary obstacle for black Americans. 44, almost half of self-described Republicans. That's a big number, mm-hmm. right? Because that's the party of individual responsibility, that the only racism that exists is, anti-white racism. Mm-hmm. Or the individual bad actor, and that they were actually saying something systemic is happening. Y'all, there was going to be a response to that. Mm-hmm. And that's when you saw this really orchestrated conservative campaign to discredit the project, to discredit the arguments of the project, and to start to say that this project wasn't a structural critique, but that it was blaming white people for what their ancestors did. Mm-hmm. Which, if you could show me the sentence in a project that does that, I'll give you $100. But then they realized they had to create a counter narrative.
That's right.
And they have, and unfortunately right now, they're winning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So just switching gears a bit, I know you've spent your career investigating the worst of what our systems produce, right? But you've also elevated those who resist. So I'm curious to know, what moments of resistance or models of organizing have stood out to you as particularly powerful or effective in challenging racial and housing injustice? Mm. And take your time.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as is always the case, the only resistance that can be effective is resistance that comes from the bottom, mm-hmm. that begins with the people who are most affected by what's happening. That's right. It is not a corporate resistance model. It is not performative. Mm-hmm. It is where the people say what their needs are, mm-hmm. and others are able to help manifest the solutions to those needs. So it has to come from the actual people who are being most affected. Otherwise, I think we tend to be paternalistic. We tend to be classist. Mm-hmm. We tend to think, we know the proper ways, the etiquette. And you just can't sustain movements that way. So I think that's really important. And then I think we have to understand that these movements will only be effective if we're in it for the duration. That if you look at the civil rights movement begins right after World War I. It takes, y'all know, I don't know if people know history, I can never say, right? It takes 50 years. It takes a lot of small steps, a lot of setbacks. We like to think, you know, maybe it began around the Montgomery bus boycott, and within 15 years or 10 years, we're starting to see real civil rights legislation. That's not what it was. There were people who lived and died without ever seeing a civil rights law passed, but they were part of that resistance movement, right? They laid the groundwork for that. So I think we have to understand we are in one of those moments right now. I've been killing myself over, that's probably why I'm so happy to be in a room with people, because I've been locked away in my writing room working on this essay, trying to help us understand what they're calling DEI is really the most profound attack on civil rights that we've seen in a century.
Yeah.
And I'm not being hyperbolic. We have to go back before the civil rights movement to see this type of nationalized attack on the rights of not just black people, but obviously of women, and obviously LGBTQ people who just now began to receive rights within the last 2 decades, are now already losing, literally seeing a rollback of rights. So we have to understand that they executed their own 50-year strategy. The strategy to overturn Roe, the strategy to eventually overturn the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that's where we're headed. That began right at the moment that those laws were passed. Like, we know this. I'm not just talking, like we historically know this. Too many progressive people are always just playing defense. That's right. Wait for them to enact their strategy, then react to it.
Yeah.
Wait for them to enact, react. And don't react too hard because we don't want to make them too upset.
Right.
That's the strategy. Meanwhile, folks are executing now. Project 2025 is the execution of a decades-long strategy that they felt they had finally come into a moment of power. They didn't even have to hide it.
That's right.
Think about it. They announced it before they did it. They were like, here's the plan. And now people are somehow shocked that the plan is being executed.
That's right.
They gave you the plan. If you read it, they're literally going page by page by page through that plan. Yeah. So any type of resistance has to do the same thing. They actually studied the civil rights movement to create their plan. And so folks who, I'm not an activist, I'm a journalist. I just tell you what I know from history. Y'all have to decide what you're going to do with it. But some folks would argue, study their plan and counteract it in the same way. But that means this is a lengthy struggle. People, you know, I am not a partisan. I don't speak for the Democratic Party, never would, don't want to. Can't anyway because I'm a journalist. But what I'm saying is when they say that the fix for this is win an election in 2 years, they're profoundly underestimating what's happening right now.
That's right. Yeah.
What an election in the next 2 years or the next 4 years is not going to change what is happening right now. And so you all, everyone, you know, who is an activist has to understand that you are embarking on a colossal journey of an activism that is not going to pay off immediately. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of hurt before we start to see a turnaround. Yeah. And we have to gird ourselves for that. Because I think, you know, I tell my students all the time, they estimate maybe 10%, probably fewer, maybe closer to 5% of people ever participated in the civil rights movement. Now, when my students talk to their grandparents, now all of them say they were in the movement. I'm like, I'm not saying Granny is lying, but Granny's probably lying. Most people don't ever participate in social movements for a variety of reasons. It doesn't mean they don't support them, right? But people have jobs, people are afraid. It's just hard to sustain activism. Activists don't get paid well, right? We don't actually think that activism should be paid, right? But you can't be altruistic for 30 years when you have children and things like that. We have to understand that. So most people don't participate in any social movement. And those social movements took a very long time to actually bear fruit. So we have to think now for the future and understand that it's not that you're going to participate in one protest or two protests or, you know, do a hashtag online, that this fight is going to, if you understand going in that it's going to take a long time, then you're not easily discouraged. But if you believe that in 2 years this is going to be fixed, in 2 years we're not going to see you.
Like, brace yourself.
So I guess, sorry, that's my answer.
No. And it's a good answer. And I mean, you're right. I think in terms of when we think about this administration and when we think about what's happening now, we have certainly been here before. And not even talking about Trump 1.0.
That's right.
We're, history, going back in history, we had a chance as a country to be a better country right after Reconstruction.
Yes.
And decided, no, we didn't want to be a better country. And so as part of that, there was all sorts of, we were talking about lynching, Jim Crow, sharecropping. We talked about sharecropping, just all of these things that happened. And it was at that point when all of these things were happening, I think, around people were still building, and creating sororities and fraternities. I think it was around that time when the NAACP was created. So people were still planting those seeds, if you will, for the future that they wanted to see to come. And like you said, it wasn't something that was happening tomorrow or in 2 years, but it was way off. And those are the things I think we as advocates, as you said, we have to think in that way. The long game is where we are at this point. So
and I think I'm going to say two things. One, there are things that we can control right now, and so I do think it is important to try to stop the harm as much as you can right now. And that we need a collectivity about this struggle, that I don't even have to understand everything about your struggle to know that I need to support it. It's like I'm thinking about, I've really struggled with what's happening around the trans issue.
Absolutely.
And I'm struggling with it because I think a lot of people, because they didn't get it, right? You don't have to get it.
Yeah,
people exist.
That's right.
They are human. They are worthy of living their existence without being discriminated against. You don't have to understand anything other than that.
That's right.
And so we let things that we didn't get, like, oh, I was so oppressed by having to use a pronoun. Listen, I mean, but this is what they used. They literally used those like slight discomforts that people were feeling to polarize an electorate over an issue that they were not being harmed by at all. I was like, don't use the pronoun. I never did it. No one ever ostracized me. It wasn't my thing. If you use it, I respected your use of it and tried to make sure that I would always use the right pronoun that you want to be referred to. But because we were so afraid of the issue, we allow people to define it in a way where they're literally stripping other Americans of their rights right now.
That's right.
And also using it to polarize, right? The issue of trans girls in sports was nobody's issue. Parents were not concerned about this. Again, narrative.
That's right.
Right? They were able to turn it, though, into one of the primary issues of the last election. So I think we have to understand that our shared humanity means I don't have to know, agree, understand everything about your struggle. But what I do have to know is you're a human being and you're worthy of the same rights that I have. And that we can unite around those things.
That's right.
Jewish people were 1% of Germany at the Holocaust. Because one thing that I've heard is with trans people only 1%. We can't focus too much energy on that issue because it's just a tiny percent of the population. You could use a tiny percent of the population to justify horrific things. And so again, this is about housing, but I know this is also just about justice. We're here today because we believe in justice. That we can't be silent as long as it's not us that's being targeted. Yeah. Because I know you know the us is, right, we will be the us.
That part.
All of us. And I think that's where I was going with that story about the white man talking about you can't take my rights. He didn't realize he could be the us. But we have a country that is being run by oligarchs right now. And they don't care about most white people either. Right, I mean, anyway, that's a different lecture too, but but I just, if there's anything you leave with today, it's like that. Our sister Audre Lorde told us, your silence will not protect you.
That's right.
And it won't. And I just think how it must feel. I have a niece in Iowa. She's a gay black woman in Iowa, and Iowa is passing, is passing some of the most regressive anti-LGBTQ laws in the country. They just became the first state in the history of America to grant a right and strip it away. And she's like, do you know what it's like to live in this state right now? And I just think about how many people feel so alone. They feel like no one's defending them. They feel like we have abandoned them because it's not convenient for our own issues that we think are important. And one day we're going to all feel that abandonment if we don't come together. So speak up on all of those issues, please.
And I know we have some questions from the audience. And as we're getting this, I do want to ask you another question because you care about housing justice and racial justice, and so do we. So we need to make this official. We need to figure out how we can shake things up together and really just, make sure that we have a game plan in place. So no pressure. But maybe just a little bit of pressure.
Okay.
Of how we can work together. All right, so we do have some questions that came in from the audience. Great. So the first question is, as fair housing enforcement tools are being undermined, how do we sustain disparate impact liability under the Fair Housing Act?
How do we sustain it?
That's what it says.
By never ever talking about it?
That's right. Check.
Right. I really do feel like we're in a moment where don't even bring, quietly do your enforcement. Don't give ideas. So we're at this, it's sort of fascinating what's happening because all of the anti-DEI, right? They're dismantling the civil rights infrastructure of the government, calling it DEI. It's not, first of all, DEI even as a concept is only maybe a decade old.
That's right.
These are civil rights and integration programs. But what's interesting about it is so then they're using the 1964 Civil Rights Act to say that all of these programs are violating the rights of white Americans. So they're using the language of civil rights, and they're actually using the language of disparate impact. So I'm like, that's interesting because you can't overturn then a concept that you're actually using to argue for anti-white discrimination. That's what they're doing. So they're saying they're looking at numbers. They're asking law firms and different organizations to give us your numbers, and they're going to use those numbers on how many, for instance, law students are getting admitted to a law firm for a fellowship or other types of fellowship programs. And they're going to use those numbers to make a disparate impact claim under the Civil Rights Act to say there's disproportionately bringing in people of color, so it must be discriminatory based on disparate impact. So this may be the time to try to bring your disparate impact cases because they can't overturn it while they're using it. So they're using it in a way that's antithetical to obviously, I mean, this is why you have to erase history too, because if you erase the history of the act, then you can erase the fact that the act was actually to vindicate the rights of minorities in a country where they are a majority, and that you can't just flip it and now call it anti-white or reverse discrimination. But I think that's the only way is, one, just be quiet about it and keep using it, because they've wanted to get rid of disparate impact for a long time. As you all know, they took a case to the Supreme Court. They weren't able to be successful, but this is a different court.
That's right.
So just do your work and don't say nothing.
That's right. So we have time for one more question.
Okay. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, it's all good. So in terms of the framing of our stories and information, how do we bring folks into the movement, especially when faced with the extreme amounts of misinformation coming from the media and public figures?
Y'all talking about me?
Not you at all.
I'm just playing. So, I'm not an activist. I'm not an organizer. I can't give you advice on how to do that. That's not my expertise. It's not what I do. My role is to be the resource of information, right? Because I do think the issue, I know the issue that we're facing is we are being algorithmed into authoritarianism.
Ooh.
And what I mean by that is it's not just young people. We like to talk about young people, but most people are now getting all of their news, all of their information off of social media. Social media is, of course, owned by the men who are on the dais with Donald Trump.
That's right.
There's been research that shows they over-index conservative viewpoints into your feed, and downplay progressive viewpoints and just factual information. One of the things they did when Donald Trump came in the second time, after he tried to overturn the election, they had implemented a lot of policies around fact-checking, election denialism. They have eliminated that. So, for instance, Facebook, Meta got rid of their entire fact-checking arm inside of Meta. So what that means is people have a very hard time discerning what is accurate information. They're not even seeing what's happening in the world. When we were kids, before we got cable, this tells you how old I am. Right, you sat down, there were 3 channels. Right, and I'm not saying that was good. I think we have democratized news in a way that I think is excellent. But what that means is, no matter what, we were all getting the same understanding of what was happening in the country. That's not happening anymore now. So if you only watch a certain news channel and you are on social media, you don't even know what's happening in the world. That's very dangerous. And there's a reason why it's like that. Because there's a reason why in societies that are starting to lose democracy, where you see encroaching authoritarianism, they attack the universities, they attack libraries, they attack intellectuals, and they try to discredit the press. Are we seeing any of those things happening?
Yes, we are.
So what's important for us is you yourselves. Don't share things you haven't vetted. Even, I don't care if it's progressive or conservative information. We can be purveyors of disinformation as well. Make sure that if you're sharing something, you've actually vetted it. Make sure that you actually go to news sites and don't just get your information from an algorithm. Seek out that information and then check people. She's telling her to tell me to be quiet. I see you over there. It's okay. First of all, I was the one telling them, I got to leave on time. Now I'm up here just talking. So let me just tie this up by just saying, we all have a responsibility. When you have someone in your feed, someone who comes to you with misinformation, just gently, because no one likes to be lectured to and people stop listening, but just gently say, how do you know that's true? Did you check this? I read this, in your local newspaper, or saw this online, and they actually said this wasn't true. Just try to get people to think for themselves a bit more, because we are being controlled by the algorithm, all of us. are being controlled by an algorithm in a way that's very, very dangerous, and will also make it very difficult for us to organize against the things that we're seeing.
That's right.
Okay.
I so appreciate you. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Thank you.
It has been wonderful being in community with you. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for everything you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. I think they want to take a quick picture.
Okay.
And thank you for everything you're doing, too. Thank you. Thank you. Be blessed. Thank you. All right. That was powerful. Incredibly powerful. Thank you, Ms. Nicole Hannah-Jones, for inspiring us and for bringing the truth. And as I mentioned earlier, she doesn't shy away from the truth at all, and that's what we appreciate. It is always about action. And so we're going to start next. We have a special, our next presenter is Rebecca Bennett. And Rebecca is going to talk about, and she's going to give us a narrative for these times and how wisdom from the natural world can inspire movements for change. Many of you in the audience already know Rebecca. Rebecca has been with the coalition now, working with all of our teams for about 4 years or so now. She works specifically with our collective team, our tenant leaders, when we spend several days in Albany, Georgia. Rebecca is our lead facilitator for that, and then she also leads the conversations throughout the year with our collective members. Rebecca is the founder of Emerging Wisdom in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm just going to bring her to the stage because Rebecca Bennett is a powerhouse. And Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. So if you're looking at the original program, Senator Elizabeth Warren should be talking to you right now. And I am not her. Right? But I appreciate this moment as we await her arrival to do a little bit of storytelling, because now we've heard both Renee and Nicole Hannah-Jones talk about the power of narrative. And information by itself won't deliver us out of this mess. Sometimes we need good stories. Of course, we need action and other things. We need resources. We need lots of things. But sometimes we need stories that help us meet the moment. And so in the time that I have with you, I want to tell you a story. And for those of you who were with me during the pre-forum sessions, you heard me tell a story about what? The butterflies. So I love stories from the natural world because I think in times of chaos, turbulence, and tumult, we need a wisdom that's deeper than human wisdom. That's older than our collective consciousness, and that has endured and persisted much longer than we can imagine. So I look for stories from the natural world that will be useful. This particular story that came to me, which I call the Gospel of the Prairie, came to me a number of years ago. I'm a DC native, but I moved to St. Louis 26 years ago, and I happened to be a part of a lot of policy and systems change and movement work and organizing work. And all about 2014, something happened in St. Louis. Anybody know what that was? Michael Brown was killed. It was the biggest racial conflagration in our history following the civil rights movement before George Floyd. And I happen to be a part of the group that's tasked with how do we figure out what the root causes are and what we should do and what should be the policy interventions and systems changes. And I got to do that work with the commission. And oh, in the very beginning of that work, there was a woman who screamed out as we were getting started, they're killing our babies. And you're talking about policies. Like, don't you understand that there's blood on the streets? Let's not over-sanitize the importance of the work that we're doing. And I remember being struck by her desire that we become accountable to what is beneath the surface of things. And so that weighed on my heart then. It changed the work and the way we did the work. And then by the time we started getting just a little bit of traction, here came a pandemic. And we would know, we could predict who was most likely to die based upon the systems and the structures, disparate impacts and outcomes. We could predict. And then we saw massive loss of life in our community and indeed in many communities, more than 1 million United States citizens, more than 15 million global citizens, first year. So I use this because in those times, I was trying to figure out how to maintain the stamina for change in the midst of perennial fires. When the people who I work with and who I am are dying and losing. And when I'm clear that heroic individual effort will simply not be sufficient to meet the times. And it was right in that moment that I decided to leave St. Louis for a bit, to take my kids on a trip up the road to Chicago, Illinois. And we went with family to the Chicago Botanic Gardens. And we did one of those tours with the tram where you go and you ride around. And if you've ever been to, in this case it's called the Botanic Gardens, but if you've ever been to a botanical gardens, how many people have ever been? These are really beautiful spaces and they're highly what? Curated, right? I mean, everything is pristine and lovely and manicured. And on that trip, the trolley stopped and we got out and the guide talked to us for a bit about this natural prairie. So we stopped at the prairie and the prairie isn't manicured. All of these tall grasses, for as far as the eye can see. It turns out that that conservatory is a conservator of Illinois' native prairie lands, only 3% of which are left because of overdevelopment. So it's trying to keep a land-based resource that is being eliminated from the landscape. I offer this frame because we often think that eliminations are only human experiences. The devastations and losses that are happening in our communities aren't just about the human world. In fact, we'll need a wisdom also beyond our own to help us figure out how do we make a comeback. So this woman tells me how they keep the prairies healthy. Now, I don't have a degree in forestry. So one of the things she says is that every 3 to 4 years, sometimes 5, they do what they call a controlled burn, where they burn the prairie to the ground, and all that you have left is blackened earth. Now, for those of you with forestry degrees, this probably makes sense. But I just want you to meet my incredulity for a minute. To keep a thing healthy, you burn it. I mean, does that make sense? I mean, to some it might make sense. But to me, I was just like, I was incredulous. I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. Clearly, this woman did not go to whatever training she was supposed to go to. Oh, okay, because she got the script wrong. And so I couldn't understand that. And I said, I'm sorry, can you say that again? And she said, yeah, every 3 to 5 years we burn the prairie to the ground in an effort to keep it healthy. And I just said, I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. And I said, well, when you burn it, how long does it take for the prairie to grow back? Are you ready for this? What do you think she said? 7 weeks? 10 years? 1 year? 6 months? 3 years? 3 weeks. 3 weeks to see substantive regeneration. I said clearly, for real, I'm talking to the wrong person. And I said, no, how long? I got ignorant. Does it take? And she responded to me, 3 weeks. Because clearly, this woman who was on this trolley was hard of hearing and comprehension. Right, and not that it was restored to its full health in 3 weeks, but we saw substantive, significant signs of growth and substantive emergence. And so I just said, you know, Miss, I don't believe it. Like, I'm gonna need you to tell me more. And this is what she said, I'm paraphrasing. And I've done a little research since, because I was so transformed by what she said. And I want to give it to you, those of us who are in this transformation business, those of us who are in this movement work, those of us who understand that we are standing on the wall between life and death, who know what the stakes are, and who are right now caught up in the throes of efforts to control by fear and control by force. What do we hold on to? Well, what she said to me was, Rebecca, what you think of as the prairie is only that which you see. And so when the fires are raging, they're raging across what you see. But you might think of what you see, what's topsoil and above, as really being the tip of the prairie. Very much like an iceberg, right? When you see that, it's the what? It's the tip of the iceberg. What you see above the waterline is actually the smallest fraction of the iceberg. That the prairie, the overwhelming majority of the prairie, 90% of the prairie you don't see. It's subterranean. So when the fires are raging, they're raging on the surface. And it seems to dominate the landscape, the fires. But the landscape isn't just what you see. And at the same time that the fires are raging above the surface, the root system of the prairie goes into hyperdrive. you cannot see that the root system underground is resourcing, is moving resources, is communicating across plant species, is creating and supporting the emergence of new life. It goes into hyperdrive when the fires are raging. Now, I'm talking about prairies, but I'm not talking about prairies. I'm suggesting that when the fires are raging, there are root systems that kick into hyperdrive. And that in the midst of this process, the root system, more communication, more movement of natural resource, right? More information, more synchronization across plant species. What happens when the fires are burning is that the invasive species, which can often dominate the landscape, a number of those invasive species are trees, which encroach on prairie lands. They're bigger. They take up more space than grasses. They seem to dominate the landscape, but their roots are shallow. So in the presence of fire, the invasive species' roots are shallow in ways that mean that those species can't regenerate as quickly. Whereas the native species on the surface seem much smaller, but have much deeper roots. And their roots hold them in place and help them come back. And not just come back more quickly. Because the fires burn up the detritus and the debris, allowing sunlight to actually make it to the earth's floor. So before, when trees and their shade, they were taking up all the light, now the light can get through. And that light supports regeneration. It also turns out that the prairie contains certain seeds with very, very hard coats. And these seeds, in the presence of fire, have their coats burned partially, and that burning away of the hardened exterior supports them in opening up. Let me say that in a different way so that you might not miss the point. There are seeds that the prairie holds that are super seeds, and they only open in the presence of fire. They accelerate and advance the prairie's growth for such a time as this. They were created to endure the fires and to support growth post-fire. I'm in a room full of seeds. In the presence of fire, so many of us are conditioned to cower and retreat, to cover, protect, and defend. But these are seeds that open in the presence of fire, that activate powers and potentialities that support accelerated growth and emergence. And they and the root system have a way then of connecting and communicating that synchronizes flowering times across different species. Let me say that in a different way. Anybody got a plant? Right? You know that plants have different germination cycles, right? Different times when they flower and bud. Different plants, take different times. But during the process of fire, in the presence of fire, one of the things that those root systems help do is move resources and communicate in ways that different species coordinate, and then germinate synchronously. They flower on the same schedule. If we have a shot at being successful in the efforts that we're engaged in, we're going to have to synchronize across species. Right, we're going to have to be bedfellows with some folks that we wouldn't have otherwise been bedfellows with. Nicole Hannah-Jones said, there might be, the middle-aged white man that has just discovered that his rights are endangered. Might indeed be a powerful ally. Welcome to the party. As the newest member of this table. Right? But something happens that makes the improbable possible. And because of that, because of the synchronized growth schedules, because of the hyperactive roots that are resourcing and moving nutrients, moving information, moving communication, because of the additional light that gets in when the fires burn the confusion away about who's winning and who's losing. It supports the emergence of a healthier prairie. I'm not talking about grasslands. Though I am. Y'all know I'm talking about grasses, metaphorically. But I'm not talking about grasses only. I'm struck by a couple of things about this story. One is they didn't say that one root did all the work. Root systems. We often talk about systems that are maladaptive, systems that are endangering life. But we are part of systems. What systems are you tending and nurturing? What webs of relationship, what webs of resource, what webs of action, what webs of caring are you actively nourishing so that we might survive and flourish? What systems, what root systems are supporting you? It's not a rhetorical question. If you use the wisdom of Nicole Hannah-Jones for a moment, who said, look, the civil rights movement as we know it began after World War I would argue the civil rights movement, the progenitor of the civil rights movement, was actually post-redemption. Right? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the period immediately following Reconstruction and the advent of Jim Crow. Right? So many of the beginnings of that movement began then. And that is to say that the origins of the modern civil rights movement began 90 to 100 years before it. So if we have to have the kind of wherewithal and endurance to persist for at least 50 to 100 years on the battlefield, then what root is supporting you? There is absolutely no way, given the intelligence you have, the expertise you have, the energy you have, the effort that you have, that you can sustain full tilt by yourself for 50 to 100 years. In fact, they're counting on the fact that you can't. We're expending all of this energy without being rooted or held by something greater than ourselves. And so I'm asking you literally, what that is greater than you is holding you? Right? What is it? And it could be different things for different people. For some people, it might be your community. For other people, it might be nature. For other people, it might be your faith. What is it? Find it. Let it feed you. Because the root system goes into hyperdrive in times of fire. There's a deeper body of resource that wants to fund our persistence. Let's connect to it. However you connect to it. But what we can't do is go it alone. This thing is too cunning, too baffling, too scary. So who's in your root system? Literally, who's in your root system? Somebody talk to me. Who's in your root system? Who? God and her big ma. All right. Is in her root system. Who's in your root system? Renee, your community. Who's in your root system? Your family. Everyone in this room. Everybody in the room. Everybody in the room is in your root system. Now let me ask you a different question. For whom are you a root system? Right? For whom are you a part of the root system? Because you have resource, you have information, you have care, you have proximity, you have relationship, you have presence that can feed, support, and nurture. Whose root system are you a part of? Thank you. Right? This is lineage work, you all. We've got to drop into the thickness of being in order to endure the hardships and the conditions of chaos. We've got to drop into the thickness. See, part of what I was confused about is that I thought the prairie was thin. I thought it was what you could see. But the reason the prairie could not be destroyed is because it was much thicker than my perception. Each and every one of us in this room is thicker than our perceptions. The nature of all oppressive systems is that they seek to flatten that which is multidimensional for the purpose of control and extraction of talent and resource. So when I ask you who is in your root system and whose root system are you a part of, I'm trying to resuscitate our sense of selves so that in the density of being, we are prepared for the fight over the long term. We can't do that with flattened, constricted, under-resourced senses of ourselves. We literally have to thicken up. And when I say thicken up, I don't mean not feel. I mean get your communal insulation. Wrap yourself in meaningful relationship. Saturate in care wherever you find it. Connect to something that can hold you when you believe and when you lose belief. and keep touching into that place. Keep touching into that place. That's the way that we survive the burns. And it's the way that we help support the emergence of the new prairie. The one where the invasive species don't dominate the landscape. And where the indigenous native species, which in this case is our deep humanity, our care for one another, our commitment to life in its many permutations, when we touch that which is most real in us and we build from that. Take this with you as you move through the rest of this conference, this story, because we need other ways of seeing and interpreting and understanding the moments we find ourselves in so that we are not reduced by them. Don't leave this conference without having touched a root. And don't leave this forum without having been a root. That's what we're here to do. All right. Is she here? Ha ha.
What another tough act to follow. Sheesh. So, again, what incredible remarks from Rebecca. And then before that, we heard from Nicole Hannah-Jones. And, of course, NLIHC's interim president and CEO, Renee Willis. So let's please give them another round of applause. I'm Jen Butler, Vice President of External Affairs with NLIHC. And if I can say, what a time to be here in community with each of you, meeting the moment and answering the call to mobilize and oppose the harmful actions on critically needed housing and homelessness programs funding. And we're doing that together. So echoing thanks for all of you that are here in person, those who are in the atrium, in the overflow area, watching us on the stream, and those of you at home, thank you so much for being here with us. And even more so because after decades of hosting this event in this very building, this will be our last year hosting here. We're excited, and it's good news, because we're excited because we have now surpassed capacity, and we're growing, and we're growing the event even fuller. So with that, let's make this last forum in this building, in a place that has housed incredible memories of forums past for so long. Let's make this one to remember. So over the next 2 days, just some tools that you guys can use to make sure that you're getting the best experience here. We invite you to download, if you have not already, our events app by Events Air. And that's an opportunity where you can network with other attendees and speakers. When we have our speakers here in the general sessions, you can submit Q&As. And just to note, again, if we're doing a Q&A and you have not downloaded the app yet, you can submit questions in the back to our external affairs team. Back here, Cecily's raising their hand in the back, and they can provide you with what you need. But if you need any questions or support with downloading or using the app, at the base of the stairs, right across from the registration, our external affairs team is at our digital hub, and we'll provide you with anything that you need. Also know that we've brought back our wellness room, so that's directly across from here in Hermitage. So if you want to unwind and decompress from all of our fierce advocacy, we encourage you to do that. And then our advocacy center is still back in Ashlawn, so we ask you all to visit there. And there you can connect with the NLIHC team across our different campaigns and initiatives for resources and tools for Hill Day. And we want to share, excitingly enough, that in preparation for Hill Day, we now have a record number of over 200 meetings scheduled for Thursday. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So not only do we want you to be there with us, we also want you to be there with us as we go forward. So if you're not already a member of NLIHC, we ask you to join us in the Advocacy Center so that you can join NLIHC and just be with us for all of the work going forward. And again, just to stress, because we are at capacity even for this event, if any of the sessions you come in, we will do our best to find you a seat, but if not, we are streaming the sessions in the executive area. I also wanted to just echo what Renee shared earlier about NLIHC's new platform, Voices Heard. So Voices Heard is an opportunity to share your story, amplify your voice, and we're going to share it directly with those who are implementing the policies. And so if you just use this QR code, you can essentially record and submit, and it's extremely intuitive, but it's just about, again, capturing your story, because we all know the impact of our collective stories. And so if you visit the digital hub, the external affairs team can provide any support if you want to use that tool as well. And so now, we got housekeeping out of the way. Can we talk? We can talk? Okay. I really just want to, again, echoing Renee, echoing the other speakers, just how grateful we are to be in community with you. Because as of now, every week since day one of this administration, we've seen deliberate attempts to dismantle vital housing and homelessness programs and funding that impacts the lives of millions of people. And so even despite these attacks beginning day one of this current term, we keep going in our fierce advocacy and mobilization. So we're talking, right? So when they tried to freeze federal funding that would prevent communities and families from receiving critically needed resources, we said no, and we kept going. When they appoint officials who refer to public housing as not being a hammock, we say no, and we keep going. When they target vulnerable communities and undermine fair housing and civil rights laws, we say no, we hold space, and we keep going. When they try to erase our history, we're going to remind them, right, that history is written in permanent ink. So we say no, and we keep going. When they try to cut HUD programs and funding and staff, we say hands off housing, and we keep going. And they continue to try and attempt since day one to destroy needed infrastructure that's not only going to impact the now, but it's very clearly going to impact all the generations to come. What are we going to say? We're going to say no, and we're going to keep going. And so being here with you all at this event, being with you all on the Hill on Thursday, I know that I speak for everyone at NLIHC when I say we cannot wait to get over the finish line with each and every one of you. Because when it's all said and done, and no matter what obstacle or hurdle they attempted to put in our way, we said no, and we kept going. And so with that, thank y'all for being you. Thank you for being here. And we are so, so excited to welcome our next speaker. As we all know, schedules are unpredictable. So we're being nimble and flexible. That is the mantra of our conference. But with that, who's going to introduce our next dynamic speaker? We have NLIHC's Public Policy Manager, Kim Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. It is my absolute honor to be here with you all today. Like Jen said, my name is Kim Johnson. I'm the policy manager here at NLIHC. You may recognize me from our National Housed campaign calls. This time, I'm here in real life. It is my pleasure and my honor to be here to interview and to start off by introducing Senator Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. Senator Warren has made a lifelong commitment to fighting for low-income people. As ranking member of the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, Senator Warren is a powerful voice for those who are struggling to afford housing. Her visionary legislation, the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, would build more than 3 million new homes, cutting rents nationwide by 10%, and taking the first steps towards healing the nation's legacy of housing discrimination through historic new investments in disenfranchised communities. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Warren helped create and stand up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has successfully, give it up. And that CFPB has successfully protected millions of consumers from predatory abuse. It is my absolute honor to invite to the stage the one, the only Senator Elizabeth Warren. Should I hear it? Just kidding, everybody. Just kidding. Got you. No, so unfortunately, Senator Warren is running just a little bit behind. So now I get the chance to work on my tight five with everyone, and I have a captive audience, so that's great. We'll just do things. Let's see. Do we have an ETA on Senator Warren? 3 minutes. Okay, 3 minutes to kill. Let's do this. All right. Should I redo her intro when she comes back in? I feel like maybe. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Great. Perfect. Yeah. I'm the real star. That's why I assume everyone is stuck around. I'll just say, like Jen said, I just really want to thank everyone for being here, for taking time out of their lives to join us today. There is something profoundly powerful about seeing so many people united in a room, fighting for the same fight, fighting for housing justice, fighting to make sure our communities and our neighbors have a safe, affordable, accessible place to call home. So it is really, truly an honor to be here with you all, and I just want to thank everyone sincerely for being here. And not just because I need to kill 3 minutes before Senator Warren shows up. I do mean that sincerely. Let's see. Yeah. Oh. She's coming? Okay, places, everybody hide and we'll pop out. Like it's a surprise party. Yeah. Get him, Miss Jerry. Yes. Hands off housing. All right. So, yeah, pretend I didn't give her an introduction already, okay? Everybody's in agreement. Yes, we are. Great, perfect, thank you. We're in cahoots now. Thank you, everybody. All right, I'm afraid of doing it again and then her not showing up, I'll be honest. So I'm keeping an eye out just in case. All right, we'll jump in. We're going to do the intro one more time, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed that this time she pops through the door. Okay. She's going to do it. Yeah, thank you. All right. So Senator Elizabeth Warren has made a lifelong commitment to fighting for low-income people. You thought I was kidding. I wasn't. I still don't see her. Oh. Huh? We're good? All right. Sweet. Awesome. You heard the intro. Everybody give it up for the one, the only Senator Elizabeth Warren. Hooray. All right. So Senator Elizabeth Warren has made a lifelong commitment to fighting for low-income people. As ranking member of the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, Senator Warren is a powerful voice for those who are struggling to afford housing. Her visionary legislation, the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, would build more than 3 million new homes, cutting rents nationwide by 10% and taking the first steps towards healing the nation's legacy of housing discrimination through historic investments in disenfranchised communities. Prior to serving in the Senate, Senator Warren helped create and stand up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which successfully has protected millions of consumers from predatory abuse. For real this time, it is my absolute honor to welcome to the stage the one, the only Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
All right, housing nerds, let's go. This is great.
I see you know your audience already.
I do.
Great.
I do. These are my peeps.
Absolutely. Well, Senator, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time.
Eventually.
I mean, listen.
Thank you all for being very flexible about this.
It's our honor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course. Well, thank you again for joining. And I wanted to kick off our conversation by talking about something that's been really top of mind for folks. And that, of course, is the immediate existential threats to HUD programming posed by Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency. And I guess efficiency as well. So I don't need to tell you or the folks in this room, but just for level setting, the Department of Government Efficiency has proposed cuts to HUD staff of up to 50%, with some departments like Community Planning and Development facing cuts of around 84%. And if allowed to move forward, such major staffing cuts would have a profound impact on communities' ability to respond to the needs of people experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity. As ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee, you are, of course, in a unique and powerful position to help push back against these threats. And evict Elon. You are in a unique position to help push back against these threats. And at the same time, Democrats are in the minority in both chambers of Congress and do not have control of the White House. So how are you pushing back against these threats, even while in the minority?
Okay, so, yeah, you know, it really is. I think level setting is exactly the right way to think about this. We do not have nearly as much power as we want. We do not have control of the House. We do not have control of the Senate, and we really don't have control of the White House. But not having as much power as you want does not mean you have no power. So we got to use every bit of power we got, and we got to use it as hard, as fast, and as effectively as we can. So that's how I start this. I also want to do another piece as we talk about this. So Elon Musk has come through with his chainsaw. I hope you all are tacking up pictures of that, showing everyone. He's coming through with his chainsaw and talking about cutting half of the staff at HUD, 70% in some areas. Why exactly? And I think the answer is basically threefold, and we have to pay attention to all of it. The first one is the administration, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, co-presidents, do not have the power to close agencies that were created by Congress. Yes. Bingo. So this is like the backdoor way to close an agency.
Yes.
You keep the agency nominally open, but there's nobody there to follow the rules. There's nobody there. In this particular case, the one that I'm particularly concerned about with HUD is to enforce the civil rights laws. There's nobody there. So, but they can go to court and say, we have not closed the agency. So we have to remember it in that context. The second reason that I think this is happening at HUD in particular, but look at the other agencies where it's happening the hardest, is that it really is their best opportunity to say, this country should do less for the poorest among us. This country should do less for those who've already suffered from discrimination, from those who've already had to climb the steepest hills, that is part of what they're doing. They're not trying to do this to say, oh, we're going to take away something Wall Street needs. Nope. We're going to take away something families need. We're going to take away something that mamas with little babies need. We're going to take away something that seniors with disabilities this is it for them. We're going to take away what they need. And I think we really have to stay focused on kind of that larger picture. And then the third part that we have to remember about why this is happening is this is a moment when they want to be able to rack up big cuts, right? And boy, we're going to do this until we're going to sprain our fingers, right, around. But they want to show those big cuts. Why? Because they're trying to grease the skids for why a $4.7 trillion giveaway to the billionaires and the billionaire corporations is really just fine, because they just made all this money by cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. So this is a 1, 2, 3 punch that they're trying to push through. So what do? You approach it in the same way. So on the first part, just focusing on HUD itself and the cuts that they're doing is you try to elevate the issue as much as possible and remind them, you may have the power to cut, but I got the power to call you out over this. You're not going to do this in the shadows. You're not going to be able to hide what you're doing. We're going to do this as loud and proud as we can. And I couldn't ask for a better partner than Maxine Waters. Yeah. We are on. Yes. Man, that is one tough woman. And take it, I know tough women. So Maxine and I are doing oversight. We do it from the position of being the ranking Democrats on the 2 relevant committees, mine in the Senate, hers in the House. So Maxine and I have already sent the oversight letters over to Secretary Turner saying, so how, buddy, are you planning to follow the law? And reminding him about his obligations as Secretary of HUD. So that's plan number 1. Within that, though, at this moment, we got to have more allies in this. And look, we'll just take it as a running. Would I love to have Republican allies? Yes. But unfortunately, that would require in Congress finding somebody with a spine. And right now, there's nobody who will lift their head up and say, wait a minute, you can't do that. So we build our allies, though, by getting more Democrats who have a chance to get engaged, who have a chance to say, I am in this fight. So we've done another round of oversight to Secretary Turner, and this is with 2 of my newest and most exciting members of the Banking Committee, and that is with Lisa Blunt Rochester and with Angela also Brooks. So we are out there. And then again, in the expand and how many people can you get, we have yet another oversight letter in oversight demands. And I've got Leader Schumer on this. We've got the heads of other committees on this. We're working, we do bicameral House and Senate. All of this is just by way of saying, I'm trying to reach as many people who also reach other people and show both Secretary Turner, the Republicans in Congress, the Republicans generally, and the rest of the country every way that we can, that these cuts may not be front page in the papers, may not be the lead story tonight on television, may not be what your podcast is covering, but it matters to you. So we're doing those. Same time that we're doing all of that, I also have asked GAO to do its own independent investigation to explain the impact of these cuts on the enforcement of federal civil rights laws, so that we get an independent story there. So that's been the principal direct here on how we're trying to push back against HUD. That'll get us started in this. Okay.
Fantastic.
All right, good.
What would your advice to, yeah, give it up. Why not? Yeah, get in there. And what would your advice to advocates be at this moment?
Oh, we need you. So I'm glad you asked it that way, because this is the other half of this conversation. My job is to do everything I can within the range of the Senate, working with the House, but ultimately in the United States, the power lies with people. And this is Constitutional Law 101. We are in the courts because Constitution says Congress writes the laws, the administration administers those laws, and if the administration fails to do that, then the courts are the ones who tell the administration they have to do it. We are in the courts. We've got more than 100 lawsuits that are currently underway and more to come. But backing all of that up has to be the American people. So we're going to have a test, and the test is, do the billionaires, a handful of billionaires, and their spineless Republican enablers own this country and get to run this country for their benefit, paid for by everybody else? Or are we still a country in which we believe that power lies with the people and the job of government is to serve those people? So that brings me to my ask from you, and that is, we need you to raise your voices and to raise them loud. And I think of it two ways. One is, all of you know people. You know people in the sense you've got people you serve, people who are your allies, people who want to help. Lots and lots of people. We need the stories. If we're going to do this grassroots, and that's how you have to think of this, that's where the power is. You've got to water those grassroots. And the way we water those grassroots is tell the story. Tell the story of what it meant to live in your car, and now you've got a place to call home. What it means to be able to bring your 3 children up in a place where they can walk to their school, and a place where you know that you are safe now. What it means to be a senior and know that you can stay here and make this work if you can just get a little help, and the difference it makes in your life between being able to live independently and being forced to have to go to a different setting. Every single story that you can encourage others to tell, and the more personal they can make it, and I don't mean identifiable, I just mean personal. You know, I got an 8-year-old daughter, I've got an elderly mother. The details about the stories, and then we got to push them out. We got to tell them to each other, but mostly we got to make sure other people hear them. We've got to make sure that every group, that any of the people you know are associated with, also know about those stories. So it could be a group of people they went to school with, it could be their Facebook group, it could be their union, if you have people who are either members or in families with union members, but ways we've got to magnify this story, and we've got to do it from the grassroots. So that is my single biggest ask, but the second ask behind this is you all are the organizers. You all are the people who are at the pivot point. You work with folks on the ground who need the help, but you also work with banks. You also work with local politicians. You also work with civic leaders. You also work with business. Heck, you work with builders, right? You work with other people. You are a trusted friend. You are a trusted colleague. The more you get the story out about if HUD implodes, you know, that hurts everything we're trying to do here. If HUD goes down, you know, that's what it's going to mean for this project you're working on, for this business line you've opened up, for the work you're trying to do. Build out more alliances and make sure they understand those connections. I leave it to you all about how you keep each other going in this fight, but I just cannot emphasize how important this is. You are truly the last line of defense in our democracy. And pulling in allies who say, wait just a minute, I'm all for cutting out a little fat over here. If something looks out of line over there, I'm all for investigating it. But I am not for bringing down the basic infrastructure of this government that helps us try to be a people that doesn't just reserve opportunity for a handful of folks who were born rich, but that tries to help build opportunity for everyone. So that's my ask. That's my ask.
Do I go? Boop. Thank you, Senator.
You bet.
So we had a question come in from the audience.
Okay.
What authority do Trump and Elon have to dismantle programs that were enacted by Congress? And do you think this will be caught in the federal court system? How can states help prepare to get in on this fight?
Okay, so good question. The answer is most of what they are doing is illegal. And we just have to call it out for what it is. I'll go back and say it again. Constitutional Law 101. When Congress creates an agency and gives it statutory responsibilities, it is not up to the administration to say, not us. We change our mind on that. So I think of us as we are the heroes who are protecting the Constitution of the United States of America. And that we got to fight for. Let me also add in this one, we need the courts. We also need the lawyers. I am not happy to hear about how the lawyers say it could be bad for business to do what's right. There was a time law was called a profession instead of just a business. I think it's time for all of us to call that out. You should be thinking now, many of you work with lawyers. Sometimes it's on a pro bono basis. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you hire counsel. The people you work with, for example, the financiers that you work with, hire law firms. I think it's time to start looking at taking a very hard look at whether or not these are people who actually believe in the legal system, and that means we get representation on both sides and we are heard on both sides. So we got to stay in that part of the fight too. You asked the question about will the courts hold? Look, I think the law is absolutely clear on what these guys are up to. That's why they're running the end run right now. They get it too, because they're actually standing up and saying, "Oh, Your Honor, we didn't really shut it down." So that, in other words, they're trying to fight over the margin here. But again, I have to underscore this: we need a grassroots movement that says the court rulings hold. We are the people who will defend the Constitution of the United States and defend the democracy in this country. We're going to all be called on for that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to need you.
Well,
Okay.
Senator, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, wow, you're
I know.
throwing me out of here already?
Oh, would you like to stay?
I would, but
Oh.
do I have to go? No, I guess if
Are we
you
good?
are doing
We got
that.
5? We got 5 more minutes.
Somebody
Awesome.
gotta
Let's
cut.
do it.
Okay.
So great. Thank you so much for taking the extra time.
Nothing like inviting someone for dinner and they won't leave.
Would you like to stay for the reception?
Yeah, exactly. What
you're
are
always
the
welcome.
snacks like?
Well, we will have an open bar.
Okay,
so,
okay.
You know,
All
you're invited for sure.
Okay.
So I did want to touch on some of the concerns around fair housing protections,
Okay.
particularly in this administration.
Yeah.
During the first Trump administration, we saw attacks on immigrant households, on transgender people experiencing homelessness, on people who are receiving housing assistance who we've seen proposals to increase work requirements, minimum rents, all of those additional barriers to accessing HUD assistance. Thanks to the tireless work of advocates and congressional champions in the first Trump administration, we saw a lot of those proposals either never come to fruition or be overturned
Right.
and replaced in the Biden administration. And now, of course, the Trump administration has a second bite at the apple. So what do you see as the role of Congress and program administrators and advocates in protecting fair and equal housing access for everyone?
So it's true. We understand the fight. And the problem is they've learned how to fight more effectively than they had in Trump 1.0. It's a really scary part of this.
Yeah.
We have to fight more effectively and be in the fight all the way. Let me offer one thought that I haven't gotten in, because a lot of this is, I'm going to say the same thing, and that is we need to keep our grassroots, we need to tell the stories, we need to reach out to our partners. But I want to add one more that's very special to the Coalition of Housing Advocates, and that is you all understand how housing lies at the intersection of every opportunity in America. It's about health and longevity. It's about whether your children have opportunities. It's about the racial wealth gap. It's about intergenerational wealth in America. It's all of it intersects here. Jobs, housing, I do that, but jobs, health, all of it. Transit, all these pieces intersect at housing. You understand that, but not all the other advocates understand that. So there are many, bless them, LGBTQ plus advocates, but who don't quite understand or may not be front of mind on why housing advocates are their natural allies. They're the people who, yes, who are right there with them. There are healthcare advocates, again, God bless them for the work they do, but who may not fully appreciate the importance of the housing aspect to healthcare and the tools that may be there. You know, I will say proudly, Massachusetts, during the Biden administration, we were able to get waivers so that doctors could actually write prescriptions for housing for families that needed help and get federal health care dollars for that, which, by the way, one of the big points we were doing was keeping track then of the consequences of that, because many of us believe it will bring down overall health care costs. So talk about building an alliance with a really powerful group that has a big audience. I want to say, I think housing advocates, I want to offer my congratulations. You have been better at reaching out to those other groups. Now's the time to double down. Now's the time to elbow your way in. Now's the time to say, wait a minute, you're doing something on union organizing. Let me tell you why housing matters to your members. You're doing this thing on how we all need preschool and what an opportunity that creates for them. Let me explain to you how housing also intersects with opportunities for parents and little ones. Because this is a moment when it is the linking that gives us our strength. We literally at this moment cannot afford to look over, for example, and see the Social Security debate and see that that is really beginning to roil and say, yeah, but it's not my fight. That's the fight for seniors and that's the fight for AARP, not my fight. The answer is yes, it is our fight. And the more you can make those links and be on each other's chain, do not make it a signal chain, please. But the more you can connect, the more likely we are to be effective every inch of the way. One other small thing I want to add to this is celebrate every victory you get. Yes. Self-care, baby. But also, we got to keep people in the game. And when you do have a victory, again, you all are good at this, but I just want to remind everyone, share it with everyone because it gives other people ideas. Yeah. Oh, well, then I'll go to my city council. And because this is what they did over in Minneapolis, why are we not doing that here? It turned out to be very effective. So I think those are ways in this intense moment where we step up our game and remind ourselves every day we are in a righteous fight, and fighting those guys is the fight worth having. So thank you. Thank you. That's a good one. Good. Good. Good.
Do you have time for another one?
I've got time for a quick one.
Oh, a quick one. Oh, gosh.
Quick one.
I guess turning to Congress, do you see any opportunities for bipartisan housing legislation? I know that our wonderful interim CEO and President Renee Willis made her debut at a congressional hearing just 2 weeks ago on the Senate Banking Committee.
Yes, actually. So here's actually a piece of good news on the housing horizon. The chairman of the Banking Housing Committee is Tim Scott, and Tim is committed to more housing. And I think this is sincere. Now, there are parts of it are kind of non-starters for me, but there are also parts in there that are possible. And we have an opportunity, potentially, to get enough people together on both sides of the aisle that this could actually be a piece of bipartisan legislation that passes. And here's how I think of it. I think of it like a big meatball, that this is not a single thing we're trying to build. It's if I can get a piece of this, I can get something that helps us get more manufactured housing that's decent quality and creates some ownership potential. And we have an opportunity to get more federal land, and we have an opportunity over there. We also have a lot of Democrats who have Republican co-sponsored bills in housing. Again, I don't want to pick them off, and we end up with less than the maximum amount we could have gotten. But we roll in the Tina Smith and Mike Rounds have one on rural housing. We have a great one on, that I think is Chris Van Hollen, on little kids. Families with little kids get elevated opportunities for rent support. The point is, more is more. Will it be everything I want in a housing bill? No. But whatever you can get is something you didn't have before. As long as you can keep mostly bad stuff out of it. Now, there are going to be some places I may get a little scritchy. But if you feel like you're getting enough positive stuff, we could actually do some things that would open, not everything we want, but open an opportunity here and another one over there and 2 in the back and 3 on this side. And I think that's a good way to approach it. Second thing I want to mention is I have a big housing bill that would build 3 million new housing units. So I was pausing just for what to say. Okay, we're not going to get the money it would take to do that immediately, but there are 2 things about it to think about. One is it opens up new opportunities to think about housing. Part of it is about how we get financing in for our CDFIs and how we build long-term financing so you're not constantly will we get our money again this year? Will we not? You know, you got to spend all your time in Washington lobbying the people on the Appropriations Committee. But it also has a new approach on the supply side. That's the part I'm really excited about. And it basically, the basic idea is to say, so if you, local community, will make it possible to do more housing starts more cheaply, we, the federal government, will give you some help. And you can use that help to build another elementary school, to build the wastewater plant that you need, or to further buy down the cost for people to get into this housing. And if you will focus that housing on those who need it most, on those who haven't had an opportunity to get in, on first-time home buyers, on people who've been cut out of the market, then we'll actually increase the incentives. It changes the role of the federal government in housing. Our principal role, if you think about it, for the last half a century, has largely been enforcement of civil rights laws, which is a good and important and powerful thing to do. And it's been, I think it's fair to say, not even stasis on affordable housing. It's been a kind of, each year we defend a cliff that, a little more crumbles away from our feet. I want to see us do better on both of those, but I also want to make the argument it is time. We're in a housing crisis in America, and it's a crisis up and down the line. We need more housing, period. We need more housing in cities. We need more housing in small towns. We need more housing in rural areas. We need housing for first-time homebuyers. We need housing for renters. We need housing for seniors and for veterans and for people with disabilities. We need housing. Housing. Supply side. We need to push on the supply side. So a big part of what this bill is about is to try to get that into our thinking, and that the federal government is uniquely positioned to be able to put enough incentives on the table to try to get that done. I'm trying to bring in all of my friends who are also on the banking committee, like Lisa Blunt-Rochester. If you meet why it's a good bill.
She'll be here tomorrow.
I heard she was going to come. So you can just say her name came up in this. But the point is to get more people who are talking supply side as well. Because here's how I think, for example, about housing discrimination. When we are 5 million housing units short in America, it is easy to discriminate. When we have enough housing for everybody and a little extra, it's actually a lot harder to discriminate. And so I think of this, we want wealth building in America. We want intergenerational wealth building. Housing is the best possible way to do this, but it starts with being able to buy a house. And if we don't have enough houses, we will increasingly make, like so many other things in America, housing will just be the toy of the richer and richer and richer. And we have an opportunity to bring that back. So thinking differently about housing, and I'm trying to engage Republicans in this notion that the federal government has a role to play here. And the part I love best about this, or one of the parts, is we're not telling localities what to do. Picking up more public land is a real idea as you go out west. Not going to buy much in Massachusetts because we just don't have much. On the other hand, federal opportunities in terms of if you're doing manufactured housing, that you can get financing faster, that as long as you're creating ownership opportunities, that may be a place where it would help us a lot, but might not help in other places. The whole point is to say to communities, stop and think, what would it take to reduce the cost of building homes for first-time home buyers? Just put that one in your brain. What would it take to reduce that cost by 15% here in your town? When I first put this bill together, you'll all be pleased to know, I actually did it with mayors across Massachusetts, and I ultimately ended up with 30 mayors who had both helped design it and then wanted to sign on as sponsors for this bill. And I know you all have sponsored it. I want to say thank you.
Of course.
But what I love best is that we have smart, engaged people who are committed to the right thing. And that is a safe, dependable, affordable home for everyone. It is such an honor to fight alongside all of you.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Such an honor.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think our CEO
That
would
was
like a photo.
okay.
Yes. Come on out. Get in here. Yes.
Hello, it's good to see you again.
See you again.
Besties.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure.
All right.
Jason.